Well, thanks first and foremost for being here. We've had a lot of great sessions over the last couple days, lots of learning. It's like a fire hose, so much stuff, so many great choices. I know that there have been lots of sessions stacked back to back and kind of over each other where I've ducked in and out of different sessions so I could catch all of the great information that's come my way. So thank you for being here, especially the last hour of the last day. So I appreciate it, and I know that all of our invisible friends are here too, so thank you. I appreciate you bearing with me. So come with me if you will. We've got some cool stuff coming along here, and this is a little more, I don't know, a little more theoretical, a little more like kind of whimsy and, I don't know, lighter than some of the other stuff that's happened over the last couple days, so just enjoy. So a little bit about me. My name is Dr. Rachel Teague. I am the consulting partner at Disruption Learning and Technology. I am more of the learning. My wife is more the technology. Even though my day job, I do work on an IT team. You don't want me doing anything IT. The extent of my IT is it plugged in? Have you rebooted? And have you turned it on? That's it. That's as far as I go with the technology side of things. So I focus more on knowledge management, change management, training facilitation, organizational development design, that kind of thing. By day, I work at Southern New Hampshire University as the Senior Knowledge Management and Training Specialist. Sounds exactly as cool as it is. I do the training side of things. I do some knowledge management, but I was really hired to be kind of the people-focused person. On the KM side, I work on a team of nerds who are fantastic, but they cannot people for the life of them. Really, like awesome guys, but really it's a matter of they write a lot of the technical writing pieces, the job aids for our help desk, and then they really struggle with the basics of kind of just communicating with the rest of the university, so I bridge that gap. I got my doctorate in global training and development with a focus on knowledge management, and I did my dissertation on how effective knowledge management, or how that program supports the critical tacit knowledge retention within a higher education institution. It was an unnamed institution, so I didn't have to jump through 8 million hoops, but you can kind of figure out where I went with that. And that was a really interesting case study because I found within our own university where we have a lot of great resources, I think I found at least 10 different repositories, and we had a bunch of silos. We grew really, really fast. It wasn't malicious. There's not it wasn't the malicious hoarding that a lot of folks kind of run into. It was just more, we blew up overnight. We had great success, which is fantastic, but with great success comes building an airplane while you're flying it, trying to get everything off the ground, trying to get programs launched, trying to get everything up in the air, and with that, we stopped talking to each other internally. And it happens. It's one of those things where we realized that there were people in different departments doing similar jobs that other departments did. And as a university, we don't really have a tried and true knowledge strategy, which is something that we're really working on. So our knowledge management program is actually truly a grassroots program. So it's a small group of really dedicated people that we have evangelized what KM is and really built it from the ground up. So even still today, we don't have a formalized knowledge program. We have best practices and we've built respect amongst the folks in the university where they come to us and they say, hey look, you have this thing that seems to be working for you. How can you help us? And we're like, perfect, we have all these tools. And that's where I come in and people and my team can help with the tools. So that's kind of how it works in a nutshell. I had a really cool opportunity this year to have a TED Talk. It's on YouTube. Unfortunately, the cat video that I posted earlier this year has more views. You guys can help me get like 35 more, so please check it out. 12 minutes long, really cool though. It talks a lot about perspective. I don't use the words knowledge management once, but it's really about knowledge management. It's about perspective. And actually, the next couple slides, the beginning of this talk, will really talk about shifting perspective. We're going to be talking about how perspective will weave into both the system side and the human side of KM. And we'll get there. So just bear with me. It's one of those things where it might seem like what I'm saying won't connect back. I promise you it will. The ADHD in me will make it. What am I doing here?
That one's on.
This one's on, and this one's on, and that one's on. Alright, I'll stand like this. I promise I won't move too much. But the ADHD in me will get back to where we're going. Okay, so just bear with me. You want me to come down? Oh, jeez. Okay. Oh, jeez. Okay. So the ADHD in me will be all over the place. I promise you I will land the plane at some point. But I also invite you, it's the last session. If you need to stand up and move around, please, you do you. You also had amazing desserts that I missed out on. So you're probably going to be in a sugar crash coma rather than sleeping. Please move. Like, it's good. We're good. Okay? So before we begin, I'm going to challenge your perspective a little bit. Okay? Throw a few fingers up. I want you to just think about the first thing that comes to mind, right? There's going to be the obvious thing, and then there's going to be the other thing. And if the other thing pops up first, you're going to be my kind of people, okay? What do you see here? All right. The skull pops up first? Me too. Okay. This is All Is Vanity. The artist is Charles Allen Gilbert. And I saw the skull first, right? But not everybody sees the skull first. Some people are not as deranged as say I, and see a woman looking in the mirror and having a nice little glance at herself as she's getting ready for her day, right? I realize, I think on this next picture, I sort of gave my animation away, but you see cat or mouse, right? So, you know, I challenge you to just kind of, not everything that you will see right away is going to be the thing that you see first, right? If you step back, your vantage point is always going to shift and change. I actually had a blast with this. I found a bunch of not suitable for KM World pictures as I was going through this, and Boyd in my group chat have a ton of fun with it. Kathleen said that I was not allowed to post them anymore. In fact, I had to delete the one that I posted to retract. It was great. And then one of our friends was like, I missed it, you deleted it, and then I got permission to post it again. It was bad. But if you're interested in all of these illusions, there's a ton of them. But definitely take a look and see what you can find. Because it's really interesting to kind of see what else is out there. This is a great story. I mean, this is 1,000 years old, you guys. I'm sure you've seen this in some iteration or another, but the gist of this is you have the blind men, the 6 blind men and women, and they're all touching different parts of the elephant, trying to figure out what it is. But just based on where they're standing, they're all blindfolded. They all think it's something entirely different, just based on what they're touching, right? And they don't understand, they don't realize they're all touching a different part of an elephant. And I love that. It's one of the greatest stories that, I mean, it's a great story, but it's a story that I often use at home with my own kids, right? When we talk about different perspectives and different ways to look at things. When you're kind of just looking at different stories and different ways to look at problems. And really, when we're tackling KM, we're tackling problems. And sometimes the obvious solution is right in front of us, but sometimes it's really important to just pause and to step back a little bit and think through, okay, I'm so close to this problem, I'm so close to the solution, how can I look at this different? And being able to pull other people in, or just even stepping back for a minute and trying to just change your angle, change your point of view, and realizing there are different ways to go around it. So that kind of got me thinking a little bit. We've seen this a million times. We've all worked in this field, right? The DIKW Knowledge Framework by Akov, right? Data, information, knowledge, wisdom. As you start to understand the data moving into information, and information moving into knowledge, and then knowledge into wisdom, the value goes up. And then as, you know, you start taking context and all those pieces away, the meaning goes down, right? Thought about it a different way. What if when we're looking at it from the systems and human side, we start to look at it a little bit differently? When you're looking at it from the system side, if you take the data and you start adding the physical structuring to things, for the instead of like where data you apply the context and that becomes information, right? The pieces there. That adds a physical structure. You're actually adding a physical structure to your pieces to give it the information. And then when you start to think through it, it becomes that cognitive structure. You're starting to put it together, and that becomes the knowledge. And then from there, you have the beliefs. It becomes more of a solid framework. And then it starts to become the wisdom. And that's more for me in my artistic brain here, in my ADHD neurospicy brain. That to me is more system, solid, process approach. Now on the other side, the whimsy side, the human side, I take a look at the data side, and as it starts to go into information, I start to understand the relationships that go into that. I start to think about how do these relate? What kind of relationships, what kind of emotion, what kind of pieces go into that? And then when I'm thinking about the information and how that connects to the knowledge, I start understanding patterns. I think about what patterns exist, how do they connect the dots there, what pieces connect, and it could be patterns in problems, it could be patterns in connections with people, it can be anything in that regard. And then from there, when the knowledge moves up to wisdom, it's understanding the principles. Is it the principles of the grouping of people, the culture? What are the principles or the norms, right? So, I mean, this is just one way to look at it. This is just one neurospicy brain looking at it, right? You could all look at this in a different way and take something different from it. So this is just one way to kind of take a play on the DIKW pyramid here, right? But this is just what I was literally at. My wife and kid were sick with COVID during the pandemic, or just after the pandemic, and it was still like, don't go upstairs, right? They were quarantining in my room. I was not in my room, I was sleeping in my office. And I woke up and had this idea, and I was like, this is really neat. And I think I spent like 3 hours trying to technology to make that pyramid. I don't know how to do that. And that was the hardest part, honestly. And then figuring this out, and I was like, this is an idea. And I kind of ran with it and talked through it. So this is from the perspective stance. That was my best way to kind of like shift those perspective pieces. Now this kind of just brings me to fold it all together. It kind of helps tie me into the people versus process, right? We talked about the perspectives, we talked about my take on the system side versus the human side. And I want to talk a little bit about the experience I had at the university and talking about the knowledge retention piece and the transfer piece. So I know a big jump. I gave the one side of the perspective. I'm going to put on the back burner for a minute. We'll circle back to it. I promise it'll make sense in a minute. But we'll talk about the people in the process in relation to this project that I did. And then we'll circle back and see how, combined with the best practices that I outlined here, how it all works together. And then I want to pull you all in for a conversation to get your take on what makes the most sense in your worlds, and see if anything has shifted in your world as far as, people versus process and how it all ties together. Okay? So just ride the wave with me here, okay? So I mentioned that we have no real plan, not real plan, but no real knowledge strategy at the university, right? It's all grassroots, it's all, it's all word of mouth. And in doing that, I realized that we really needed to have some sort of knowledge retention and sharing program to kind of help capture that critical tacit knowledge. We had this woman who had been with the university for, 20 plus years. She actually developed the teaching program from the ground up. She was one of the very first people to develop this program. She was a party of one, and then she built out the complete certification that all of the students who became certified teachers in the state of New Hampshire and then beyond ended up going through. It was really crazy. And then after 20 years and all of the iterations up and down, she retired. But she gave us like 6 months notice. So when she told me she was retiring, I was tasked to hang out with her. And I hung out with her for like 3 months. And I created what we called the Kathy Bible. And it ended up being a pretty hefty document. And she's like, I really don't understand how me talking to you is going to like save the day. And I was like, it's not going to save the day, but you'll see, you'll see. And from our conversations, I was able to put together a proper handbook of some historical knowledge, right? Some important pieces of this is really critical when it comes time for annual reports for accreditation. These are really critical relationships to maintain in the state as far as, programmatic pieces, things like that, right? Things that you don't necessarily think about that are incredibly important, or even think to write down. And it saved the new dean a ton of time in recreating the wheel. But it also helped get the new dean up to speed as far as how can I save time when it comes time to hiring. And he was able to identify in her one retirement 7 new hires. 7. He only had a budget for 4, but 7 new hires that came out of her one role. And we were able to then budget for the following year to hire the additional 3, which was just bananas in my opinion. But with that, it helped me kind of put into words this knowledge retention program. And another thing that kind of came out of that was, as we were seeing with the turnover, not just with natural attrition, like retirement, thing like that, people were losing lots of critical tacit knowledge, right? And we needed to still continue to support our current operations. And then from there, it posed the question of how is our critical tacit knowledge after the turnover transferred and retained by our operations, right? How are we still keeping it? And it wasn't just Kathy that kind of sparked this. This was also found with our millions of repositories. Okay, millions, exaggeration, but lots of repositories and lots of conversations of people not knowing each other anymore because we grew so rapidly. This was out of just a lot of just tornadoes trying to figure out where is everything. So that's the why. And then the how came from defining and operationalizing the framework for the retention. I was able to go through and then streamline, this is how we're going to make these retention pieces possible. We made a multimodal toolkit and repository for people to be able to pull from to do some self-service, but also have a small team share best practices to be like, hey, this is how you can do this. You can partner up and have retention. You can do a one-on-one if it's a really big retention like a Kathy project, or you can do it yourself. We have many ways to do this. There's no excuse for not doing it anymore. But because we are grassroots and evangelical, really, we can't govern. There's no real governance. It is all strongly suggested. But we were able to get quite the buy-in, and you'll see that in just a minute. And then we marketed it as a pilot as an enterprise-wide service. So then they loaned me out as a people leader. They're like, go forth and share your knowledge. And I was like, all right, I can do that. I can go talk to everybody and do all the things, and I'm out, right? So I talked to everybody. You couldn't get rid of me. And then we were able to launch the repository. We built a repository in my super favorite SharePoint. Also, I hate SharePoint. Remember, not the technology person here. But if I can figure out how to build a SharePoint, anybody can figure out how to build a SharePoint. And I will also say, no real shame on SharePoint. I mentioned that we have 1 million repositories, right? Therefore, it was the Wild West and there was no governance, right? So once we figured out how to rein SharePoint in and offer some support and governance, SharePoint was not the bane of my existence anymore. So I will recant my super hatred for SharePoint and just make it a minor hatred for SharePoint because I still don't know how to technology. So there's that.
So what happened, right? As we were able to really streamline the framework, we were to get people on board, we were able to get people interested, and we were able to shift the perspective, right? We got people interested. We were able to say, hey, look, this isn't working, but we can work together and get you on board and get you into this. I got 80% of my business units adopted. I got increased participation, I got cross-functional collaboration. We shifted a culture. We sparked the culture to be like, this is crazy, this actually works, let's do this. I want to help, let's share. Right? Maybe not quite that enthusiastically, but they did it. And then I had a 100% report adoption of the process, right? So 100% of the, even though I had the enterprise-wide participation was 80% of the business units, but of the people who participated, 100% participated, which is crazy. So I was pretty darn proud of that one. The fact that I was able to get all of that going, just with my annoying, let's do this in a largely virtual environment, was pretty good, and that perspective shifting. So that was pretty cool. Themes and findings from all of that, a strong community and culture was able to facilitate that openness and knowledge sharing. The stakeholder buy-in created that robust learning. The transparency assisted in breaking down those silos. And then the training and the consulting, being able to like offer myself as a service. Being able to say, hey look, you need help? Here I am, let's chat, right? That was a huge piece. It prevented the critical knowledge loss. It might not be, feasible every single time, but once I was able to get talking and say, hey look, I'm willing to help you. It got other people to say, oh, I can help you next time. And it was like a domino effect. So not only was it able to shift the perspective of it just being, Rachel will do it every time, it was like, hey, we can do it every time. So it shifted the perspective of one person doing one thing to we can do one thing. So it also, if you think about it going back from the process of it being a singular, system, it really was a system of all rather than a system of one. So it was very human-centered as well as system approach, at least in the way I see system, and not just like, system, process, blah, blah, blah. So, one great benefit of knowledge sharing, it contributes to that learning-oriented culture. So for us with IT, we sit in the middle of it all. We, in this case, HR, our campus, our academics, our student experience, our operations, we touch all of them. We hit everybody. And as a result, everybody comes to us. And then they hear, oh, you're in IT? Help me fix this thing. And I'm like, no, I can't do that, but I know somebody who can. And then, again, that trickle-down effect, everybody is wrapped around. And because we're that shared service, we then have that leverage to own the KM piece, even if it is that people side still, right? So we're really positioned well to be able to do the people side as well as the systems piece, the technological side, all of that as well. There's been a lot of conversation recently about picking us up and dropping us in HR, for example. And HR is cool and all, but I really don't think that I would be able to get anywhere near as far in my work as I could if I was in HR. And I hold HR certifications. Technically speaking, the master's I hold is it's in management and leadership, and SHRM counts it as, they count it as HR because they gave me a membership based on my degree. But it was one of those things where they said it was HR enough to be HR. So I was like, all right, fine. But I don't think, based on the culture at my organization, I would be able to get people to talk to me as openly as they do if I were sitting in HR, right? And part of, as we've talked a lot about this week, knowledge management also needs that trust. And for whatever reason, top IT people are in computers and they see what you do, the trust is there, right? So I find that being in the center of the world here, we are able to get further, which also fits there. So, also with the learning org, this is a really cool thing that my boss Tim Dobro put together a concept. He was here last year, could not come this year, but I love this because it really kind of talks about the longevity of the elements of a learning organization. If you think about, an infinity loop, obviously that's kind of what it is, right? If you think about how knowledge being an everlasting evolution, right? You have knowledge with knowledge transfer. You start with, if you think about onboarding, right? You start, you learn a job. You're probably shadowing somebody. You're probably doing all of the trainings, all of the things, but you're learning by doing. Your training doesn't stop as you are 6 months in or whatever. You're probably going to still be learning something somewhere along the line throughout the course of your job. And then as you continue on the job, you get the experience. There should be some knowledge capture somewhere in there as you're going. Ideally, there should be some sort of place where you do a dedicated knowledge capture. My proposal for that, maybe an annual review or quarterly or something, where you do a dedicated capture where you were able to write it down and say, hey, this is what's different for me and my job now than 6 months ago. There's a quarterly, something, where you say, these are the responsibilities I took on in the last year. These are the responsibilities I offboarded in the last year, whatever. I like to do it for myself, independently, every 3 or 4 months, just to make sure, I've got, I call it define the bus syndrome. Probably shouldn't call it that, but I want to make sure somebody knows how to do the reports and stuff that I do in case something happens, right? And then, goes back in and you do it iterative. And then as it goes through, it should be built into the development, and then you should have the continuous knowledge sharing and more retention. But then as you start to leave, your knowledge transfer shouldn't happen in the last 60 days of your employment or the last 2 weeks. It should be iterative all the way throughout. And then go back into the onboarding so it's not just, chasing your tail constantly. So this is just another piece that I love to incorporate that helps with the human side as well as the system side, the process. So when you think about the different best practices that go along with that, for the people side, you want to make sure that there's that cultural alignment where you have the practices aligned with your organizational culture, right? You want to make sure that you're doing things with your people that align with the, you want to meet your people where they are. I'm repeating a lot of the same stuff you guys have heard all week, right? That's the beauty of going last, right? I'm not saying anything new at this point. I'm just a different voice. And then you have the engagement and training, right? You're actively engaging your employees, you're training them, you're supporting them, you are cheering them on, you're giving them their resources and their tools. And then with leadership and support, you get that buy-in, you get the organizational leaders to champion, and you manage them, and you support them, and you get them in on your initiatives. When you have the community building, you have the communities of practice, the interest, you have the collaboration, you get the people on board, you push them forward, you have all of that. And then you offer that continuous improvement. That's that learning org diagram that I just showed you came into play, right? Everybody got their pictures? So then when you think about the process side, similarly, you have your standardization, your documentation. You want to establish your processes. Your knowledge sharing across the org. You want to have your mapping, your classification, making sure you have that common language. You want to have your retrieval mechanisms. You want to make sure everything's robust and clear. Quality assurance, you want to validate it, right? You want to have the continuous monitoring, improving it. You want to make sure that it's data-driven. You want to make sure that everything's aligned. And then that's it there, so right? So you have these things. I'll leave it up for a minute for its glamour shot.
You will get a link to all the slides. Don't worry.
It's good. Glamour shots are good. We got time.
Okay, well, put yourself in a shot then.
I'm sorry. I wasn't done. All right. So I know I went through kind of like a lot of random things and it seemed jumpy, but this is where it all ties together, right? The beginning we talked about
the perspective. The middle, we talked about having like what I did and why it was kind of important to the job and the retention piece and how I was able to kind of like prove the concept what it was. And here we talked about the different best practices of the process side as well as the human side. So now this is where you guys come in and the engagement piece is starting. As you walked into this room today, I'm curious. If you were to say that you were people first before process, not that one is better than the other, but if you, in your role, had to put people before process, I'm just curious, raise your hand. Okay. And if you found yourself being process first before people, you can raise your hand. I'm not going to come after you, I'm just curious. All right. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to find somebody, either with a different opinion, different view, or if that's really scary, find somebody else that you can just talk to for a moment. I'd like to open the floor for conversation amongst yourselves, and I'd like you to talk for just a few minutes about what, if anything, kind of sparked your, thought process here about either people being first or process being first, and if anything here has shifted your mindset a little bit or your perspective shifting a little bit. And I'll say that again because I know that was super confusing. I want you to think about how you might shift your perspective to the other side. If you are a people-first person, how might you shift your perspective to be process-first? Sometimes, not always. And if you are a process-first person, how might you shift your perspective to sometimes be people-first? That was way clearer. Good job. All right, cool. So just pretend I didn't say anything the first time. Go with the second time. You have 2 minutes. It's okay. Just find somebody and talk. sounded like a lot of great conversation. So, anybody brave enough to share an insight from their conversation? Excellent, yeah.
I'm sorry, I just voluntold her.
Nice! Voluntold
What she said was so good. I'm like, what are you saying?
Well, we had a really good conversation and really different perspectives, which made for a great conversation. But I'm new to knowledge management, just a whole year. And when I came into the team, they're like, here's the process. Your job is to do knowledge management for all these business units and go and do it. So I'm like, okay. And, I'm like, this is the process. This is what you do. This is how you share your knowledge. This is how you transfer it. And, listening to you, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going from process to people first when I get back to my job. And I forgot why I say that. Just kidding. Why did I say that? No, because,
not everybody fits the mold in the process. You have to kind of gauge the people.
Yes.
To kind of get the knowledge and then, evaluate the process to kind of, transfer the knowledge to that.
And let me tell you a secret. The next time you do it, you might have to switch it up.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
It just all depends on the person.
Yeah, there's no prescribed method.
No size
right?
fits all.
Yeah, you're gonna. One of the things that thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate that. One of the things that I teach this stuff in some different programs in different places, but one of the things that I often call this is my experiential tool belt. Right? I walk around with this invisible tool belt where I keep all of my tools just in case, and I have all sorts of just things that I would pull from my bag of tricks, and I'll pull it out. And I always have all the things ready, but I might not use tools for like 6 or 8 months, and then suddenly this one time when it's raining on a Tuesday, I pull it out and there it is, and I'm good to go, right? So having all of the things ready, but knowing when to use it is super important. Being able to shift to that and recognizing that is huge. Being ready for next time is always a great one. So thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that.
Another?
Oh, Stan's got a good answer.
Yeah, I'll give it to Stan.
No.
No, you sure? You don't.
No, I was kidding. No.
You don't mind, do you? All right. So yeah, we had a pretty good conversation. So I don't remember your name. Sorry. Lindsay. Totally Lindsay. She works with some stereotypically introverted people. Right on. And scientists, right? So me, in my 30-year career, I've never had to deal with that because it's always been a people-first mentality. It's a very people-driven thing that I do. She was trying to work with the people, but they didn't want anything to do with it because they're very stuck in their ways. So she had to be processed first because once you started messing with them, you're not going to get any feedback until they see how it had impacted them. And I've just never had to deal with that before, so I kind of opened my eyes that seems much harder to me. But yeah, process had to come first just to get some feedback on what she was doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
One more? Do you have a closing? Any more questions?
Yeah, I'll wrap it real quick. I mean, I will say that. I mean, one thing that I'll say too that. I say this with everybody that I work with, whether it's at a session like this or if I'm teaching a certification class or anything. I like to really rely on the community in general, right? So I am huge in being a thought partner. If you, or especially if you're new, and actually, that's my cool animation. I did that myself. Hold on, wait, yeah, right there. I forgot I did that. That was left over from another presentation I did one time. That's my PowerPoint skill. Also, IT right here. So this is just my closing slide. But find me on LinkedIn because I'm huge on community. And if you're new, I fell into KM by accident. I didn't know what KM was until I became a KMer, right? I left the position and I documented everything because That's just what you do as a respectful human. And I received text messages for like 6 weeks afterwards because I was the person who literally was the last person who knew how to do the thing. Even though I trained everybody up and down and sideways, I was the last person who knew how to do it. And then I fell into a consulting role with this older gentleman, really nice guy, type of guy who could go home and read a manual on how to use a program called Banner and could run it the next Monday over a weekend, but he could not talk to anybody. He could not people. So they called me Kevin's translator and would send me in, and I was on a payroll team. I don't know how to payroll. I like to get paid on time and accurately, but I don't know how to payroll. But they put me in on the team with him because I knew how to document things and I knew how to people. So they put me in with him, and I had to learn how to document the payroll process. And I sat with the girl and I was like, hey, teach me like I know nothing. And she was like, okay. And she literally taught me the whole payroll process. And she's like, well, is this how you do it? And I'm like, well, you know, some of our clients do it this way. And she's like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, why do you do it that way? And she's like, oh, well, Kathy taught me that. And I was like, oh, didn't Kathy leave like 6 years ago? And she's like, yeah. I was like, haven't you only been here for like 8 months? She's like, yeah. Right? So I would identify the gaps and I'd bring it to Kevin, and Kevin would ask me the questions and I'd bring it back and I'd be like, oh, so you do this? So I was literally the mediator, the middleman, trying to figure out why they did the things. I still didn't have any idea it was knowledge management. And then I got hired in my current role at the university and got certified in knowledge management at KMI. And now I know, like now I fell in love, right? I became a knowledge manager and I've now pretty much buried myself in it. I love it. I rabbit holed to the nth degree. And that's where I am now. So you've, especially, and that was a long way of saying, I like to talk about it. So if you're new and you want to talk about it, if you're somebody who has been in it for a long time and you still want to talk about it, if you need help, I can't encourage you enough to reach out to anybody in this room, or most anybody in this room, because some people are introverts and they just don't want to talk yet. But they will. They're all knowledge managers, right? And just talk to each other. Stan has a wonderful community via email, the SIKM community, where you throw an email out into the Ethernet in the world and you will get messages back with answers, and 1 million of them at that, with great information. Or find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I will always set up time for virtual coffee. I will always do that. And I'm a huge believer in that. So please, reach out to us, well, me, and the rest of you, because you're learning and knowledge sharing. That's what I'm about. So that's my closing. Does anybody have any questions? Because there's a microphone right here, and we are at time.
We are at time, and I do want to stress there is a closing session. There is a keynote speaker, very valuable to go to, I am told.
I appreciate you staying for me. Thank you.
So,
It's worth to be like 5 of you.
let me just ask, are there any librarians in the room? Okay, librarians or translators. This is our thing, so keep at it. I will see you in I don't think it's the ballroom, but find the room for the keynote. The big room. Thank you again.